My son hadn't answered his phone in 11 days. The silence was a physical weight on my chest, a constant gnawing dread that made it hard to breathe. I stood on his pristine front porch, the November wind biting through my wool coat, and I knew, with a certainty that turned my bones to ice, that something was terribly wrong. The house was dark, a void in the row of cheerful, illuminated homes. I'd taken the first bus from my little apartment in Oak Creek. The 3-hour journey, a blur of anxious landscapes and silent prayers. My fingers, clutching the strap of my purse, were numb with cold and fear. I knocked, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet street. Jonathan, Maya. My voice was thin, swallowed by the vastness of the suburban night. No answer. I tried the knob. It turned easily in my hand. The door swung inward on silent hinges. My sanctuary, the place of Sunday dinners and Christmas mornings, had been violated. The living room was a war zone. A floor lamp was toppled, its shade crushed. Books were strewn across the rug, their pages splayed like wounded birds. A single, high-heeled shoe lay on its side near the fireplace, a stark, lonely object. The air smelled stale, with an underlying acrid note I couldn't place. Thought my heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic drumbeat of panic. Jonathan, Maya sweetie, it's Grandma. Silence. I moved through the wreckage, my legs unsteady. The kitchen was worse. Drawers hung open, their contents utensils, rubber bands, takeout menus, spilled onto the tile. A chair was overturned, and there, on the counter, next to a stack of unopened mail, was a half-empty bottle of Maya's favorite strawberry syrup, the kind I always bought for her. It was tipped over, a sticky pink puddle congealing on the granite. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my breath catching in my throat. Jonathan's home office was ransacked, his expensive monitors dark and dusty. His bedroom was eerily neat, the bed made with military precision, but the master bathroom, the medicine cabinet gaped open, empty, and a single pearl earring I recognized as my daughter-in-law's lay on the floor near the shower. Then, I reached Maya's room, my 8-year-old granddaughter's domain. The door was ajar. I pushed it open. The room was a snapshot of interrupted innocence. A half-finished puzzle of a unicorn was on her small desk. Her stuffed owl Hootie was perched on her pillow, but her closet doors were open, clothes pulled from hangers. She must have grabbed her pink sequined backpack from the hook before hiding under the bed. A sound, faint, a rustle, then a soft, rhythmic tap, dash tap, dash tap. It was coming from under her bed. My blood ran cold. Maya, I whispered, my voice cracking. Honey, are you in there? The tapping stopped. A profound, terrifying silence descended. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, staring at the frilly pink bedskirt, imagining what horrors might be hiding in the darkness beneath. My mind conjured images from true crime shows I should never have watched. I stumbled back, fumbling for my phone in my purse, my fingers so slick with sweat I could barely dial. 911. What's your emergency? A calm female voice asked. My son, my family, they're gone. The house is, there's a noise, under my granddaughter's bed. I was babbling, hysterical. I gave the address, my words tumbling over each other. The police arrived with a swift, professional efficiency that did little to calm my terror. 2 officers, a man and a woman, their faces set in neutral masks. I led them upstairs, a silent, trembling ghost in my own family's home. In here, I managed, pointing a shaking finger at Maya's bed. The female officer, her name tag reading J. Reynolds, knelt down. This is the police. Is anyone under there? You need to come out now. The silence was absolute. Then, in a single, coordinated motion, they lifted the twin bed, its cheerful lavender frame suddenly looking monstrous, and there she was, my Maya, curled into a tight ball, clutching her sequined backpack to her chest like a shield. She was filthy, her blonde hair matted, her favorite yellow dress stained and torn. In her small, grimy hand, she held a bottle of water, the source of the tapping sound. She must have been nudging it against the floorboards, but it was her eyes that shattered me. They were wide, unblinking, fixed on a point 1,000 miles away. There was no recognition, no relief, no fear, just nothing, a terrifying vacancy. Ma'am, is this your granddaughter? Officer Reynolds asked, her voice soft but firm. I could only nod, tears streaming down my face. I fell to my knees, reaching for her. Maya baby, it's Grandma. You're safe now. She didn't flinch. She didn't look at me. She just held on to that backpack and her water bottle, her knuckles white. The officers helped her out. She moved like a tiny, broken doll, offering no resistance, but no cooperation either. As they guided her from the room, her gaze swept over the destruction in the hallway, and a single, silent tear traced a path through the grime on her cheek. At the hospital, under the harsh fluorescent lights, the reality of the situation solidified into a nightmare. Maya was admitted for severe dehydration and shock. A child psychologist, a gentle woman named Dr. Evans, spoke to me in a hushed tone in the hallway. "Mrs. Sullivan, Maya is suffering from a profound psychological trauma. She's completely nonverbal right now. We need to give her time and a feeling of absolute safety." "Where is my son?" I begged the detective who had arrived, a wary-looking man named Detective Miller. "Where is Jonathan and his wife Lila? We're treating this as a missing persons case, Mrs. Sullivan," he said, his voice a low rumble. "We've issued an Amber Alert for your grandson Liam. He's only 3. We have no leads on his or your son's whereabouts. As for your daughter," he hesitated. "We found her car abandoned at a rest stop 40 miles from here. No signs of a struggle. Lila, my sweet, sometimes flighty, but always kind daughter, and she was a talented graphic designer who worked from home. She loved her children with a ferocity that sometimes bordered on anxiety. She would never, ever leave them." I spent the next 2 days in a hard plastic chair next to Maya's hospital bed. I held her limp hand. I sang the lullabies I'd sung to Jonathan. I read her favorite books about brave princesses. She gave no indication she heard me. She ate when the nurse spoon-fed her. She drank when a cup was held to her lips, but her soul was elsewhere. The only thing she clung to was that backpack. On the 3rd day, a break, Detective Miller called me out into the hall. His expression was grim. "Mrs. Sullivan, we got a warrant to search the house more thoroughly. Our forensics team went over Jonathan's home office. We found something." He held up an evidence bag. Inside was a small, black electronic device, about the size of a matchbox. "It's a GPS tracker." It was magnetically attached to the underside of his desk. I stared at it, uncomprehending. "A tracker? Why would anyone—" "It gets worse," he interrupted, his voice low. "We also found this tucked inside one of his accounting textbooks." He showed me another bag. It contained a single, cream-colored business card. The print was elegant. Stark, Aetherius Financial Solutions, specializing in high-yield low-risk portfolios. Silas Thorne, managing partner. The name meant nothing to me. "I don't understand." Jonathan's bank records show that over the last 18 months, he transferred over $285,000 to an LLC, registered to Silas Thorne, Miller explained. "It appears to be a sophisticated Ponzi scheme. We believe Jonathan, as a financial planner himself, may have been both a victim and an unwitting recruiter for some of his own clients." The world tilted. My son, my careful, responsible Jonathan, caught up in something like this. It was impossible. "He wouldn't," I whispered. "He's so cautious. Desperate people do desperate things," Mrs. Sullivan Miller said, not unkindly. "And $285,000 is a powerful motivator for someone to disappear, or to be made to disappear." The pieces were forming a picture, but it was a grotesque, horrifying image I refused to accept. My son, a criminal, a target. That evening, back in Maya's room, I was trying to get her to sip some apple juice when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. My heart leaped into my throat. "Hello." A woman's voice, hushed and frantic, spoke. "Helen Sullivan." "Who is this?" "It's Chloe. Chloe from the PTA from Liam's preschool." Her voice was trembling. "I shouldn't be calling. He told me not to talk to anyone." "Chloe, what's going on? Do you know where Jonathan is? Where Liam is?" "I saw him," she whispered, the words tumbling out. 2 days before everything, I saw Jonathan at the grocery store. He was with a man, a tall man in a very expensive coat. They were arguing, Helen, not yelling, but intense. I heard the man say, "You have until the 15th, Jonathan. The principal, plus the VI. We're not a charity." Jonathan looked terrified. I'd never seen him look like that. "The 15th, that was 5 days ago, the day the silence began." "Did you tell the police this?" I demanded. "No." The man, he saw me looking. He just stared at me. "Helen." It was the coldest look I've ever seen. I was scared. I'm still scared. The line went dead. I stood there, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. The principal, plus the VI. Loan shark terminology. This wasn't just a failed investment. This was something darker, more dangerous. The next morning, Detective Miller was back, his face like granite. "We identified the man from your neighbor's description. Silas Thorne. He has a record fraud, extortion. He's a ghost, operates through shell companies. We can't find him, but we got a warrant for his financials. The $285,000 from Jonathan was just a drop in the bucket. He's scammed millions. He placed a file on Maya's bedside table. There's more. We pulled Leela's phone records. For the last 6 months, she was in frequent contact with a number registered to a David Chen. A cold dread seeped into my veins. Who is David Chen? He's a private investigator, a very expensive one. Miller paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Mrs. Sullivan, it appears your daughter-in-law was having your son investigated. The final pillar of my reality crumbled. Leela, investigating Jonathan, had their marriage, the one I'd believed was so strong, be a lie. Was her disappearance not a victimization, but an escape? I looked at Maya, still and silent, in her bed, clinging to her backpack. What secrets was that little bag holding? What had she seen? Dr. Venz had said not to push her, to let her come back in her own time, but time was a luxury we might not have. Liam was still out there, my grandson. That night, after the nurses had changed shifts and the hospital grew quiet, I pulled my chair close to Maya's bed. I didn't try to coax her to speak. Instead, I started talking. I talked about her father as a little boy, about how he'd tried to build a rocket in the backyard and singed his eyebrows off. I talked about the time Liam took his first steps, stumbling right into her arms. I talked about Lila, about how she'd stayed up all night sewing Maya's Halloween costume to be perfect. I talked until my voice was hoarse, and then I mentioned the name. Maya, I whispered, my hand covering hers. Did you see a man named Silas? Nothing, not a flicker. I tried another angle, my heart pounding a brutal rhythm against my ribs. Sweetheart, was Mommy, was she upset with Daddy? For a long moment, there was only the hum of the medical equipment. Then, a miracle, so faint I almost missed it. A single word, cracked and broken, escaped her lips. Fighting. I stopped breathing. They were fighting. A tiny, almost imperceptible nod. About money, I guessed, thinking of Thawne. She shook her head, a slight movement. Her eyes were still distant, but a new tension had entered her small body. About a secret, I ventured, thinking of the private investigator. Her fingers tightened on the backpack. Another micro-nod. Double quotes. What was the secret, Maya? Did you hear what it was? She began to tremble, a fine, full-body shudder. Her eyes squeezed shut. The box, she whispered. Daddy's box. Box what? Box. Jonathan didn't have a box. Then I remembered. Years ago, for Jonathan's high school graduation, I'd given him a simple, polished wooden box. He'd used it to store his most treasured possessions, his first watch, a love letter from his college girlfriend, the ultrasound photo of Maya. He'd called it his memory box. I hadn't seen it in years. I assumed it was in the attic. Maya, I said, my voice urgent but gentle. The memory box, is that what you mean? She nodded, more vigorously this time. Tears were streaming down her face now, silent and fast. Mommy was looking. In the closet. She was crying. She found it. My mind raced. What could be in that box that would cause such a reaction? The night, the bad night, I pressed, my hand tightening on hers. What happened, baby? You can tell me. She took a ragged, hiccuping breath. It was the most sound she'd made in days. The man came, the tall man. He was yelling. Daddy was crying. I'd never seen Daddy cry. Her voice was a thin, reedy thread. He said, you ruined me. Silas Thorne, I asked Dot. She shook her head. No, the other man. The one from the pictures. Pictures? What pictures? Liam was scared. He was crying. Mommy picked him up. She looked at Daddy, and she said, Maya's face contorted with the effort of memory. She said, you did this. You and your lies. Then she ran. She ran out the back door with Liam. Leela had run. She'd taken Liam and fled into the night. But why hadn't she taken Maya? And the tall man? I asked, dread coiling in my stomach. He had a gun, Maya whispered, her eyes wide with the memory of the terror. He pointed it at Daddy. He said, where is it? Where's my money? Daddy said he didn't have it. Then the man hit Daddy with the gun. On the head. Daddy fell down. There was red. She started to sob. Great, heaving gasps that racked her tiny frame. He didn't get up. He didn't get up. I gathered her into my arms, holding her tight as she finally released the horror she had witnessed. My son was dead, beaten to death in his own home by a loan shark. The police later confirmed it was Jonathan, his body found in the basement, a sight I identified with unbearable grief at the morgue. And Leela had run. She'd saved Liam, but she'd left Maya behind. Had she been forced? Was she a victim or a collaborator? I rocked my granddaughter, my own tears mingling with hers. The mystery was no longer about where they were. It was about why. Why had Jonathan gotten involved with a man like Silas Thorne? And what was the secret Leela had discovered that had shattered their marriage at the worst possible moment? The answer, I was sure, was in that wooden box. I called Detective Miller immediately. He listened, his silence heavy on the other end of the line. "We'll put out a bolo for Leela and Liam," he said, his voice grim, "and we'll tear that house apart until we find that box." They found it 2 days later, hidden in a false-bottomed drawer in Jonathan's office desk. A drawer the initial search had missed. Inside, nestled among the old mementos, was a sealed envelope, addressed to me. With trembling hands, I opened it. "Mom, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm so sorry." I got in over my head. It started small, an investment for a client that went south. I was trying to make it right, to cover the loss. I thought Silas Thorne was my savior. He was a shark, and I was the idiot who jumped in the water. But that's not the worst of it. Leela, she found out about the money, yes, but she also found out about the other thing. The thing I never told anyone. Before Leela, there was another woman. Her name was Anya. It was a brief, stupid affair. It ended before I met Leela. I thought it was buried forever. Anya had a son. His name is Leo. He's 9, and he's mine. Silas Thorne found Anya. He threatened her, threatened the boy. He said if I didn't get him his money, he'd go to Lila. He'd tell her everything. He'd take me for everything I was worth in a custody battle. He was going to destroy my family from the inside out. The $285,000 wasn't just for his scheme. A large part of it was for Anya, to get her and Leo away from him, to set them up somewhere safe. It was my penance. Leela found the bank transfers to Anya. She didn't know about Thorne's blackmail. She just thought I had a secret family, that I was supporting another woman and child. She hired a PI, David Chen, to confirm it. When she confronted me, it was the same night Thorne came to collect. She thought I was a monster. She took Liam and ran. I don't blame her. I just pray she's safe. Please, Mom, find Leela and Liam. Tell her the truth, all of it, and take care of my Maya. She's the best part of me. I love you. I'm so sorry I failed you all. Jonathan. The letter fluttered from my fingers. The weight of my son's secret, his guilt, his desperate, flawed attempts to fix his catastrophic mistakes, threatened to crush me. He wasn't a criminal. He was a man who made a terrible error in judgment and was systematically destroyed by a predator. The police found Leela and Liam a week later, hiding in a women's shelter in a neighboring state. She was terrified, convinced Jonathan had sent people after her. When I showed her the letter, her face crumpled. The anger dissolved into a grief so profound it was a physical presence in the room. "It was all a lie," she sobbed. "He was trying to protect us, and I left him. I left him to die." "You saved Liam," I told her, holding her as I had held Maya. "You did what you thought you had to do to protect your child." Silas Thorne was never found. He had vanished, a phantom who had orchestrated our ruin from the shadows. The man who killed Jonathan, one of his enforcers, was caught and convicted of manslaughter, identified through security footage and a tip from a witness. He confessed during interrogation. He got 15 years. It felt like nothing. We sold the house. The memories were too painful. Leela, Liam, and Maya moved in with me in my small apartment. It's crowded, and the grief is a fourth, permanent resident. Maya is in therapy. She has nightmares, but she's talking again. She started drawing dark pictures of tall men and fallen fathers, but lately, she's begun to add bright yellow suns in the corners. We are a family, shattered and remade, bound by a tragedy we never saw coming. I look at my daughter-in-law and my grandchildren, and I see the legacy of my son's love and his failure. The world believes he was a crook. We know he was a man who loved his family too much to see the trap until it was too late. I learned that the most dangerous monsters don't live under the bed. They walk among us in expensive coats, offering solutions and sowing secrets. I found that a grandmother's love can become a fierce, unyielding force, a shelter in the storm, a voice for the silent, and a promise to rebuild, no matter how deep the wreckage. What secret would you risk everything to protect? Share your story of resilience below.